and welcome to Get the Table, another wrestling roundtable discussion podcast with myself, Adam Wilborn, and the Dally Boys of WhatCulture here to discuss another burning wrestling issue. And today's issue is what needs to happen at All Out. And Sid, the speculation is rife, of course, not only in terms of the world title picture, but also the main event of All Out following the events, of course, of this week's Dynamite.
Yeah, I mean, look, the way that AEW books this quarterly premium pay-per-view model, they just do the biggest match possible. They don't do B-level pay-per-views. They certainly don't have A-level quarterly pay-per-views. Masquerade is something they shouldn't be. They always feel enormous. Even if Dynamite drags some weeks, the pay-per-views are ultimately always worth it, and that is because they always book the biggest match possible. And for me, CM Punk versus Jon Moxley just got bigger. After Dynamite, I know it's been wildly divisive. The buzz can only be a good thing. And I think we just got enough of a glimpse of how phenomenal the physical chemistry could be. It felt pissy in the beginning, and then it felt a little bit like sad. And what a dick CM Punk's been on screen of late. You felt like sympathetic towards him because, he's just come back, recovered his foot, and now he's planted it wrongly. And the guy's gone from the biggest dick in wrestling on screen. He was such an arsehole to Jon Moxley, and that's obviously in storylines informed Jon Moxley just going, right, if you're going to be like that to me, I'm going to destroy you. He said it himself on the road too, and it was a lovely callback to, remember the pandemic? Ugh. No, we're still in it, goddammit. But you know what I mean? Remember the worst of it. Remember when everyone sold it anyway. His wonderful thing was, look, everything's in a complete state of flux. Everything's bleak. Everything's utterly, horrifically uncertain. Except I'm the world champion, I'm a great guy, and I'm the certainty. And if you go back to his matches with like MJF and Brian Cage, he told you exactly how he was going to win and foreshadowed it. And he did the same thing on the road too. So that was a lovely little detail to the storyline. For me, my enhancement of the sequel, my enjoyment, of the sequel, the imminent sequel that I think is going to happen anyway, has been like immeasurably enhanced. I just love the idea of CM Punk being a complete and utter dick on television, completely disrespecting and waving off the challenge posed by Jon Moxley humiliating him, and how CM Punk has to tie this comeback story into the ultimate selling performance as a babyface in Chicago. He's linked that back to his words to MJF saying, I'm trying to be a good guy. And this, realistically, fighting this Jon Moxley in this form on one foot is going to have to be the absolute best good guy babyface performance of his career. So it's all very lush, very detailed, and that's the only main event for me, unless my esteemed fellow Dudley has got a different alternative.
Well, yeah, we're just over a week away from All Out, and Sid said it there, the title match on Dynamite was divisive. You and I felt very differently to the way Sid felt about it. How do you see it? Could you be sold on a rematch with Punk, or would you rather see a different person challenge Moxley?
I think, truthfully, the only thing selling me on a rematch, and ultimately I guess these are the only things that matter, are the people involved. Jon Moxley versus CM Punk are the only people that could sell me on watching Jon Moxley versus CM Punk again. So lucky for AEW, it's them. This was supposedly a Moxley pitch, which has played out as he has wanted it to do. CM Punk is a guy that puts an awful lot of care and thought into all of his work, short and long term. So he's probably seen how they can make this work. I honestly think the All-Out match is maybe a greater challenge than it might appear on the surface, despite the quality of the workers, despite the quality of Moxley and Punk. It's going to be hard and uphill to get people to receive Moxley as a heel, even if CM Punk is the hometown babyface and indeed the injured heroic babyface. Moxley is so beloved, I think it's going to be a challenge and uphill to make Punk as beloved as he typically is in Chicago. Was it Punk and MJF in Chicago that didn't sell out the last time they were there? There is sort of some precedent now that, not that the novelty's worn off, but AEW is in Chicago so often and they've had their fill, that maybe that crowd might not be as enthusiastic for Punk as they were
Impossible.
At the First Dance or at All Out. And this is the thing, improbable, but maybe not impossible. Punk was leaning towards turning, and I think a lot of fans were ready to receive him as a heel, and now this will be a test of their skills. Now, skills I think they have. But I think it's going to be more of a test of all of their skills to see this plan through. I'm interested to watch it play out to see if they can live up to the challenge they've set themselves. Before Dynamite, we were trying to work out how this match would go, and none of us forecast it would go this way. And again, that in a way, regardless of what you think of the finish, and I wasn't a fan of it or how the match played out, that is a certain credit to AEW for yet again finding something that almost nobody, well, I didn't see anybody calling it going this way, but for them for finding a different way to do it. The only other option beforehand, and now the only other option beyond this Punk match, is MJF. They have a week or so now, certainly one taping left to establish a new challenge. One Dynamite taping left. You assume they do it before Rampage. One Dynamite left to establish a challenger. Typically, there would be rankings. Typically, there would be the next challenger in line. But look, whoever it is, and I don't have that information at hand, whoever is currently number one in the AEW rankings, with due respect to whoever that stranger is, simply isn't the pay-per-view challenger to Jon Moxley. So if not Punk, it simply has to be an MJF. It simply has to be an outsider, somebody that has kind of come in out of nowhere, away from the kayfabe confines of the AEW World title, up to and including Double or Nothing. Every AEW pay-per-view beat its equivalent pay-per-view from the prior year, going back to 2019, into 2020 and 2021. It feels like All Out won't be able to do that. No. If they had one match, it was the first meeting of Punk and Moxley, and that's not there anymore. So I don't think the second match can. MJF might not be able to, and frankly, Steve Austin or somebody like that probably couldn't do it. So without that pressure on them, I guess they could take some risks. But I just think from a perception point of view, unless they deliver something that feels, going into it, as big as the hype did for Punk Mox 1, I think it's going to look like a failure of promotion. So I think it can only be option A and option B. Dave Meltzer is reporting Punk and Moxley, so we can rely on that as much as we normally would, that's at least the working plan. So they must have faith in Punk and Moxley's ability to rise up to all these challenges they've set themselves as elite workers, and that's what they are. You know, that there are a few guys that I would trust with these circumstances. They're two of them.
Sid, you said...
Can I have one more take on this?
Yeah,
Sorry, it's just come to my head. Right, you've watched Breaking Bad.
Yes.
You've watched Breaking Bad. A lot of people have watched Breaking Bad. But, you know, this applies to a lot of, like, great drama. There were so many situations where Heisenberg, Walter White, was placed into where you thought, that's it. He's done. He's either going to die. He's either going to get caught. There's no way he can escape the situation. And to watch him actually get away with it was incredible, because you thought there was literally no way out. And there's shades of that here, because what you've done is you've not only established Jon Moxley as even harder, tougher, more of a badass than he has been this year, because he can squash CM Punk in 2 minutes, but now CM Punk's re-injured his foot in storylines. I love the idea of this sort of Breaking Bad adjacent like plot twist, where it's like, if anything now, how on earth can CM Punk get this title back? And I think there's an absolutely substantial amount of drama there that will, in fact, sell the pay-per-view. And they are very much going to articulate this on Dynamite next week.
Sid, you said when we were talking about it on a Dynamite review, let it play out. I've seen a lot of people say, I don't really know, you know, some people loved it, some people hated it. And I saw a lot of people saying, I don't really know how to feel about this. I'm going to make a judgment call. I think Simon Miller himself said it. When we see where the story goes from here, whether it be on Rampage, on Dynamite, or at All Out, of course, how would you feel if it's not Punk versus Mox and it is MJF in Punk's place?
Oh, I don't actually know. I would probably be... I just trust them implicitly. Like CM Punk, for all his faults at a personal level, supposed and all the rest of it, for all of Tony Khan's excesses as a booker, the fact that there are certain things he's doing where he's simply not listening, like very quickly as an aside, everyone buried the Dragon Lee thing. I don't think there was a single fan who loves AEW who was like, oh my God, poor Dragon Lee, he got turned on in this white-hot angle. I think everyone was basically saying that was rushed and a bit weird.
We forgot to talk about it in the preview for this week's Dynamite.
Yeah, absolutely, because it was just a non-issue. The timing snafus that plague Dynamite all the time. Everyone buried this, and Tony Khan listens, and AEW listen, and yet this Kip Sabian thing was a little bit like that, wherein they just do this weird angle tacked on at the end of this like thrilling trios match. So for all of the complaints he can level at Tony Khan, I just don't think Tony Khan, CM Punk, and Jon Moxley, 3 of the smartest operators in all of pro wrestling, have told a story in which CM Punk looks like a bitch. Especially with the ego on Punk as well.
And there's no pressure on them to put the world title match on the telly.
Yeah, if you look at the intelligence, the ego and the political sway, all held by CM Punk, there's just not a chance in hell that this is not going to a rematch.
It's almost unheard of in pro wrestling. There'll be examples, rule-proven exceptions now, I've said this out loud, but it feels almost unheard of that the wrestlers would put themselves under the pressure of having to deliver the immediate sequel as being better than the original. Like, they have placed themselves under quite a unique spotlight here, not least when a wrestler that was tacitly teasing turning heel has now got to revert right the way back to being the most babyface version themselves. Over the desks in the office today, because it is all that we can talk about, is this match and the fallout and the permutations and all that kind of thing. I think I posed to Sidgwick, I was like, well, there's probably no worse a place for a heel turn, but what if this is to facilitate the confirmation of a heel turn? The idea that Punk can't get it done. That would make some sense in the context of this specific story, because we've just seen him go down and get beaten easily by Jon Moxley. And typically in pro wrestling, the next move would be, well, if I can't beat you fairly and I'm hurt, it is to cheat. But they have found themselves in the worst possible destination for that.
It's WrestleMania 17.
It's like, we joked coming out of recording another podcast yesterday that, like, the worry is, could All Out 2021 was compared with WrestleMania 17 as this landmark amazing pay-per-view. The worry is, WrestleMania 17 represented WWE's peak. What if All Out 2021 represented AEW's and they never got back to those heights again? Hopefully it won't go that way. But this is the other comparison, yeah? If CM Punk was to turn heel as a result of desperate, he turned heel as a babyface and fell on it and broke his foot again. He's going to turn heel for real at the pay-per-view by, for example, because you've seen this knocking around, MJF returning and sliding the diamond ring Punk's way to get back in his good books and help him win. This is the worst destination to do it. It's the best opponent to do it against. Jon Moxley is a safe as houses babyface, but it's the worst place for them to do it. So they have, again, it just goes back to all these uphill battles that I'm kind of curious to see if they can win on the night.
Quick final word on MJF. If he replaces Punk in the title match, would you have him leave as champion?
Yeah.
Can't lose it after all that.
The whole, you know, there's all sorts of fantasy booking around MJF, as you've been invited to do. But the whole situation on MJF getting into this would be as a result of, like, stacking the deck against Jon Moxley. He gets in at the last possible moment where Moxley can't prepare, where MJF theoretically should be in the best physical shape of his life. He's won the physical game, he's won the mind games. Jon Moxley has been the fighting champion all this time. MJF will probably cheat. He's going to do it in Chicago to rally up that specific crowd on purpose. It would have to be an MJF win, I would think.
Yeah, you can't have him, after all this time, lose the world title match. It just makes no sense, because you kill the character immediately if you do that.
One final thing as well here, Sid, when you look at All Out, I know traditionally, obviously, the world title match goes on last, and I would not be surprised if that is the case here. If not that, they've obviously got these trios titles. You've got the Elite involved in that. We are presuming, and no spoilers for Rampage or anything going forward. We haven't read anything. But one would assume they are heading towards potentially the Elite versus the Dark Order, with maybe even Hangman Page wrestling in that match. Do you think that's the way they're going to go? And could that match headline instead?
I think it's the way they're going to go. As I've mentioned previously, I do love the idea tracing all the way back to the events of All Out 2019. And we talk a lot about how they're not just, AEW wrestlers aren't just involved in a feud here and there and maybe a face turn if the heel's not working or vice versa. Like, they are going on long, long arcs. And when they're really well curated, there's nothing like it in pro wrestling. Hangman Page is on one of those arcs, and I love the idea of him actually physically seconding the Dark Order to the ring, because it's the one thing the Young Bucks wouldn't do at All Out 2019, 3 years prior, and it's just what an illustration of what, like, the good babyface man Hangman Page is at heart, of the character. Anyway, but he's going to be in the match because it's, you know, he's the best worker in the Dark Order by, like, miles and miles and miles. Again, I haven't read the spoilers, so whatever. But it's not going to main event. It's not going to main event. Like, just Tony Khan is beholden to what is, like, weirdly sort of manifested as tradition when it never really has been. I think it's like an invention of the modern fan if you look at various territories and all the rest of it. But whatever, it kind of, if it wasn't a fact, it's become a fact now. And it's a fact in AEW, even to the detriment of the world title match. He's often gone this route. I think it's only, Stadium Stampede that have been the rule-proven exceptions. But that's purely from a logistical point of view, I believe. Yeah, the trios match, at its best, could be incredible. Like, the minute that Kenny Omega stops the work and reveals himself or grows into himself as, like, this rehabilitated, like Best Bout Machine is going to blow the roof off the building, and it's going to be incredible. So in any other city, there'd be a risk that there's no coming back. Like the Best Bout Machine's back, and he's tore off the compression suit. He looks like he did at Dominion 2018. Oh my god, that would peak most shows. But it's Punk in Chicago. There's just that risk, and it is a risk because I think there's been 2 AEW main events across their however many pay-per-views at this point that have been the loudest match on the show. It's actually quite rare that happens because the durations are so exhausting. There's no doubt whatsoever that Punk Mox isn't the loudest match on the show, so there's no reason for them to main event with a trios title.
But regardless, you think the Elite crown the inaugural champions?
I do, yeah. All I feel like I'm presenting here are struggles for Punk and Moxley because I think this match presents them with another one. This trios match, they will be aiming for this to be absolutely epic in scale and quality. Assuming it is going to be the Elite with Hangman Page on the other side of the ring, expect a litany of incredible spots that services those that watch every single second of being the Elite, plus people that have just seen every minute of Dynamite. As Sidgwick was talking, you've always mentioned the buckshot into the V-trigger and the world explodes moment.
Yes.
I was thinking of one where Kenny Omega, still struggling, still hobbling, just falls over as he did against Okada as Page is prepared to take his head off or something like that, because like that match, as these ones always do, will invite you to think of a million different spots and then they'll deliver a million different ones on top of that. It is going to be this incredible awakening of the Kenny Omega character physically. It's probably going to see them crowned trios champions, or if not, this incredible moment between Page and the Bucks and Kenny Omega that people have been waiting for and wanting to see. So whilst I think it's highly unlikely that goes on last, it will feel every bit the main event and be yet another challenge for Moxley and Punk. That world title, I wouldn't say it's a problem, but that it's a conundrum that I don't think Tony Khan has yet solved about how to keep the fans hot and have that world title program that suits that main event spot and stops the crowd from going quiet or feeling exhausted on some of the other things they've seen. Punk and Moxley, as with everything else, are the guys, but it's going to be fascinating to watch them live up to yet another, and live up to the billing, as like so few pay-per-view main events have been able to do.
It is going to be a fascinating road to All Out in the next week or so. Let us know your fantasy booking, what you'd like to see go down at the show in a very quiet wrestling weekend that weekend. On Twitter at WhatCulture WWE or in the comment section below. Like, share, subscribe. Follow all 3 of us on Twitter. You can follow Michael Hamflett at
Michael Hamflett.
You can follow Michael Sidgwick at
M. Sidgwick.
You can follow me at Adam Wilborn, and you can get your hands on Sidgwick's brilliant book, Becoming All Elite, The Rise of AEW, on Amazon right now. Follow us all at WhatCulture WWE. But for now, this has been Get the Table. My thanks to the Dally Boys. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you soon.